Hi guys, it's Michelle, and today's video is going to be all about different true crime cases that were solved by social media. I think this is such an interesting concept for a video because there are so many different true crime cases that honestly would not have been solved without the help of social media. So I just think it's super interesting to talk about. And without further ado, let's get right into it. The first case is pretty famous, and a lot of people don't know that this was actually solved by social media, and it is the case of Dee Dee Blanchard. So many people know the story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. She is a victim of Munchausen by proxy, which essentially what happened was Dee Dee raised Gypsy Rose in this lie that she had leukemia, muscular issues, seizure problems, severe asthma, brain damage, all of these things that she just told Gypsy that she had, and Gypsy was just kind of living under her control, even though Gypsy was a perfectly healthy girl. I'm sure you guys know the story. This case as a whole is pretty insane. Pretty nuts to me that Dee Dee and Gypsy Rose were such a public figure in the community of just like being known as like, oh my god, like that woman is such a good caretaker of her kid, and like she has to deal with this kid that has all these medical issues, and how sweet is that? She would get a lot of sympathy, money, various things for this. So the whole time they were kind of playing this role of mother and daughter, and Dee Dee seemed to be a very devoted, loving, and caring mom, and Gypsy Rose was portraying a sweet, disabled girl who allegedly had the mental capacity of a 7-year-old, which obviously now we know that is not true. Gypsy also to the world needed a wheelchair, a feeding tube, extensive medical care, and somehow Dee Dee Blanchard manipulated several doctors and medical records and would just switch doctors anytime they started to question Gypsy's ailments. So they never got caught. And honestly, Dee Dee might not have ever gotten caught if Gypsy didn't kill her. And that's kind of scary. So as Gypsy was growing up, she started to realize that her mom had been lying to her whole life about her health. She knew that she could walk. She knew that she didn't have a lot of these ailments and was just confused why her mother was like forcing that on her. But you know, she was also getting like free trips to Disneyland and financial donations. And so Gypsy just like, as she got older, kind of started to realize that this was something that was seriously wrong here. Dee Dee Blanchard did a very good job to keep Gypsy isolated and controlled in every aspect of her life. Gypsy was not able to access her own medical records or gain financial independence, and Dee Dee honestly prevented Gypsy from doing a lot, like making friends, going to school, etc. So in 2012, Gypsy began to rebel secretly when she would go and use the internet without her mom knowing. And on a Christian dating site, Gypsy Rose met Nicholas Godejong despite the distance because he lived in Wisconsin and Gypsy and Dee Dee lived in Missouri at the time. The two began an online relationship. Gypsy began confiding in Nicholas about the abuse that she suffered from her mother. So Gypsy and Nick at this point decided that they were going to kill Dee Dee. And they began planning this murder so that Gypsy could escape her mother's control. In June of 2015, Nick traveled to Missouri to meet Gypsy. And on June 10th of 2015, while Dee Dee Blanchard was asleep, Gypsy let Nick Godejong into the house and gave him a kitchen knife, and he went and stabbed her mother to death. After Dee Dee's murder, Gypsy and Nick fled to his house in Wisconsin, and they took $4,000 worth of cash that Dee Dee had. Now, social media really ties in here because just 4 days after the murder, Gypsy started posting really weird shit on her mom's Facebook, which was strange in my opinion. I really don't understand like what her thought process was on that. But regardless, she famously posted on Facebook, "That bitch is dead." And people obviously were like, girl, what? Like, who is this? Did you get hacked? Whatever. Thinking that Dee Dee had gotten hacked. And Gypsy responded in the comments saying, I slashed that fat pig and R-worded her sweet innocent daughter. Her scream was so fucking loud, LOL. Which is literally insane. But Gypsy wrote that, pretending to be, I guess, Nick? And I don't know. So these posts obviously caught the attention of Dee Dee's friends and family. So that was when they started to worry. And basically the neighbors and friends of Dee Dee ended up alarming the police about these posts that had been posted and saying that they had not heard from Dee Dee and they're concerned and they needed to do a wellness check. So the police did a wellness check and ended up finding Dee Dee's body in her bed. At first, police had actually thought because Gypsy's wheelchair was still there. And at this point in time, literally she was known for not being able to walk. Everyone assumed that Gypsy had been sort of kidnapped or murdered in some way and was somewhere else. And so that began to immediately flag alarms and really wanted to make people find Gypsy. Of course, they ended up finding Gypsy and Nick, and they were convicted of first-degree murder, and Gypsy Rose pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. At first, she tried to act like she didn't know that her mom died. It was like just a little strange because like it was, I think, very obvious that she was lying. I mean, obviously the prosecutors and like knew as well. But then eventually she confessed and told them the whole story, and Nick Godejohn, honestly, he kind of just told the whole story from the beginning. And he was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole in 2018. Gypsy Rose obviously sentenced less because she was sentenced to second-degree murder in 2016, and she was released this year. So I'm sure you guys all remember. I just think the role that social media played in this case is not talked about enough, because had Gypsy not posted that on Facebook from Dee Dee's account, how long would it have taken for them to notice that something was wrong? Could Gypsy and Nick had fled to God knows where by then? Who knows? I also think that the online footprint of Gypsy and Nicholas's online relationship is very important as well, because I was able to have police officers be able to piece together the nature of their relationship, the nature of the murder plot, and how involved each person was. So honestly, it completely helped solve this case. I think it's really interesting, and I kind of want to hear you guys' opinions on Gypsy Rose. I've never done a video on Gypsy Rose. Honestly, I don't know why, because it's definitely a very interesting case, but I want to hear what you guys think about it, like, because I think there's a lot of mixed opinions of her as a person. She kind of became like a social media person after she was released. I want to hear your guys' thoughts, because I guess we just have never talked about it. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to talk to you about it. Let's talk. All right, the next case that we're going to be talking about that was solved by social media was of a girl named Nicole Lovell. Nicole Lovell was a 13-year-old girl from Blacksburg, Virginia, and I think that it is very important to note that if social media didn't exist, this wouldn't have even happened, but also the digital footprint is what led to arrests. So it's still important, I guess. Nicole was a normal young girl, and she began to do things on social media like every other kid does, like go on Omegle and then talk to the people that she met on Omegle, on Kik. That was like a pretty normal thing for this to be happening at that time. But in 2015, Nicole Lovell started talking to David Eisenhower, who was an 18-year-old Virginia Tech student. He was a freshman and a track star. He seemed normal, but he was engaging in inappropriate online behavior and communication with Nicole, even though he claims that he didn't know her age, but that was later disproven. On the night of January 27th of 2016, Nicole snuck out of her home to meet David, but she was never seen again. Her mom woke up the next morning, and before she left for work at like 6:30 a.m., she went to check on Nicole, realized that she wasn't there and the window was open, and then immediately started panicking and of course called the police. Nicole's friends, I guess, ended up telling police that she claimed that she was like meeting her online boyfriend that night, and so that kind of led investigators to pick through her phone and social media profiles. This is where police found David Eisenhower and realized that the two of them had been communicating for months. So the police went to interrogate David Eisenhower, and his story was very strange. He basically said that he had been talking to Nicole online, who said that she was 17, and then he went to go meet her on the night that she disappeared, but she came out of the house and he said, oh my God, she looks like she's 12 years old, like this is clearly a 12-year-old, and he drove away. That is what his story was, and then that he went to his friend's dorm. That was his story. Police immediately were like, all right, that's a little too like strange. The fact that you were talking to this girl, that you're the last person who saw this girl alive, there's going to be a lot of questions. So police never really believed his story. But then they kind of wanted to go further and see like who was this friend that David was talking about. He identified the friend and classmate as a girl named Natalie Keepers. And Natalie Keepers let the police go through her phone, and yet at the same time she was acting like she didn't know what happened at first, and then she was like, he murdered Nicole and asked me to help get rid of the body, And then the police were like, girl, we have your phone. We can see the text. We know that you were involved in this from the beginning. Basically, David Eisenhower had told Natalie that he feared that this girl, who's 13 years old, is going to tell the police or the public or whatever that he is talking to her when he's 18 and that he's gonna get in trouble for that. Again, I just like don't understand logic here. Because, like, yeah, of course you're gonna get in trouble for that. You know what you're also gonna get in trouble for? Murdering someone. Like, you think you can get away with murder, you little fucking 18-year-old bitch? No. But anyway, it goes back and forth whether it was David or Natalie's idea initially. I kind of think it was Natalie's idea. I don't know why. Just, like, because why are you involved? Like, why would you want to be involved with that? Like, it's kind of sadistic. And we already know he is gross because he's talking to a fucking 13-year-old, but it's just strange. So basically we learned everything that happened from the digital footprint that Natalie, David, and Nicole left behind. So David and Natalie went to a diner to plan Nicole's murder. They went, picked her up, brought her to a place in the woods that they had scoped out earlier, and brutally murdered her. And then they brought her body like 100 miles away from where she was killed. And again, social media and text messages were used to prove that Natalie and David were talking about where they were going to hide the body, what they were going to do. Like, all of these things, literally planning a murder over their cell phones. And obviously that is crucial evidence that implicated both of them in the crime, because Natalie tried to lie and say she was, like, not really involved. But she clearly was from the beginning, from before the murder happened. So again, without the use of social media, they would have never connected David to Nicole at all, and then also David and Natalie to this crime. So honestly, the entire story was corroborated by the evidence that they found on the social media apps. And I just think it's insane, and it is so fucked up and senseless that this literal child had to die because this man is a freak. That's so horrible. David was convicted of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to 50 years in prison, while Natalie was convicted of being an accessory before the fact to first-degree murder and for concealing a dead body, and she was sentenced to 40 years in prison. A lot of people debate whether or not David or Natalie was the one who actually killed Nicole. People have different theories on this. Either way, I just think it is so horrible, and obviously, like, yes, without social media, this wouldn't have happened at all, but also, like, the fact that this was able to be solved by the digital footprint is honestly, like, it's remarkable, because if we didn't have that, then there would be no connection between them. Like, if they had just met on Omegle, and, like, they were like, he was like, I'm gonna come meet you, or something, and they never exchanged phone numbers, I don't think that they would ever have found him. And that's scary. Like, that's terrifying, and I'm sure it happens, so I don't know. All right, the last case that we're going to be talking about is all about the Craigslist killer. This is an insane true crime case that I have never heard of before. It's honestly pretty nuts. So it began on April 10th of 2009 when a woman named Tricia Loeffler had posted an ad on Craigslist offering adult services, and she got a call from a man who agreed to meet her at the Westin Hotel in Boston. Once she was inside the hotel room, this man tied her up at gunpoint, robbed her of $800 cash, took all of her credit cards, her underwear, her ID, but he ended up leaving her unharmed, so she was later able to provide a description for this attacker, which a lot of people assume that this man was targeting adult workers on Craigslist, because that's, like, in some cases illegal in itself, so a lot of them wouldn't report crimes like this, but Tricia decided to anyway. And thankfully she did. She had descriptions, they used security footage, and were able to find him on the security footage, but no one knew who he was. And it was just a scary couple of days, and literally 4 days later, on April 14th of 2009, a girl named Julissa Brisman was an aspiring model, and she also put an ad on Craigslist for an adult massage, and a guy called her and arranged to meet at the Marriott Hotel in Boston. Now, Julissa, unlike Tricia, because Tricia was, like, very compliant, she just, like, did whatever he said, Julissa tried to fight back, and he ended up beating her to death with the gun and then shooting her. But yeah, somehow he escaped. There was like a report of hearing like a woman screaming on the floor of the hotel, but somehow he got out before the hotel security was able to get up and find Julissa. This was obviously incredibly sad, but the police knew that they kind of had like a serial armed robber on their hands who was willing to kill people, and that is really fucking scary. And they ended up meeting up with Trisha and identifying in the security footage from the Marriott that was the same guy, and it was. Then 2 days later, on April 16th of 2009, a woman named Cynthia Melton, who was a stripper that advertised on Craigslist at a Holiday Inn in Rhode Island, met up with this man as well. And during the attempted robbery, he did the same thing. She complied, like he tied her up, was taking all of her things. But during the attack, Cynthia's husband actually walked into the hotel room, and the perpetrator fled the scene without harming her. Police investigators were kind of panicking at this point. Like, this is a really scary situation. This man is like willing to keep going, even though like he had just had a botched robbery happen where he literally killed someone, and he still was doing the same thing. So the police really got scared at this point, and they ended up using Julissa. She booked all of her meetings through a friend, and that friend had the email address of the person who Julissa met up with. So the email address didn't lead anywhere, but the IP address that tracked to the email address led to an apartment that was lived in by a 23-year-old boy, Philip Markoff. And this kid looks so normal. I want to say, like, I mean, anyone, I guess, could be a killer. Like, sure, Ted Bundy, that's a thing. This kid is a med student. He was a medical student. He was just studying to be a fucking doctor. He was engaged. He, like, seemed very, very normal. And that's their perpetrator. They're like, oh my god, we caught this guy. So for a while, the police ended up tailing him and following him just to make sure that this was really their guy. And they were pretty sure of it, but they really had no evidence to corroborate that, and they couldn't get in contact with Trisha at the time to be able to positively identify Philip as the killer. But on April 20th of 2009, I think Philip got the idea that the police were maybe onto him, so him and his fiance, Megan McAllister, were on their way to Foxwoods Casino in Connecticut. So they were just gonna do a little vacation, but the police didn't want him to cross the boundary of Massachusetts because they were tailing him, but he hadn't, like, really proven that it was him yet, so they didn't have enough evidence to like arrest him. But they ended up pulling him over, and before he left Massachusetts, and basically told him that they were taking his car, and he kind of just complied, which was strange. His fiance Megan was asking several questions, being like, wait, why are you taking the car? Like, what's going on? What the fuck? All of these things, and so a lot of people don't believe that his fiance was aware of any of this. The police ended up arresting him, and simultaneously Trisha had been shown different photos of various men, and one of them included was Philip Markoff, and she pointed him out directly and said, this is him. They then got a warrant to search his apartment, and they found plastic restraints similar to those that were used on the attacks, and also a handgun inside a hollowed out Grey's Anatomy textbook, which is just like literally fucking nuts. They also found Trisha's underwear. Like, he had stolen pairs of her underwear, which is just creepy, obviously. So this evidence was obviously enough to tie Philip to this case. He was charged with first-degree murder, and he pled not guilty, and then his trial was set for 2011. But Philip Markoff never stood trial because on August 15th of 2010, while awaiting trial in jail, Philip Markoff ended up taking his own life. He took his own life on what would have been the 1-year anniversary of him and Megan McAllister's marriage that was supposed to happen that obviously never did. Honestly, I cannot fucking imagine what that would be like for his friends and family that like didn't expect it. Like, again, we've heard stories from so many of this man's like teachers, friends, family members that are just like, I cannot believe that this was this guy. Like, how did he do such a horrible crime? Like, what the fuck is wrong with him? He literally had his whole life ahead of him, was a med student, gonna be a doctor, would be rich, was getting married, and just threw his life away to be a fucking creep. And it's just insane. And he was from a pretty small town in New York that a lot of people, it was very close-knit, and a lot of people knew him, and everyone said that he seemed normal. Honestly, I'm personally freaked out because he looks so much, I don't know, you guys remember I said this in a video and everyone was like, girl, what the fuck is wrong with you? You're so stupid. One time I was driving in the Hollywood Hills at like 3 o'clock in the morning. There was like a 26-year-old guy on the street. He looked like a normal guy, and he was like stopping for help. He was like on a Lime scooter, and he was like, please, like, he was like, I need help. I'm at a bachelor party. My friends all left me. And I was like, girl, get in the car, let's go. I drove him to the Airbnb. Like, thankfully, he wasn't a fucking serial killer. But that man, like, looks as normal as this guy. A med student? Like, I don't know. Oh my god. It just really fucking freaks me out. But either way, this case would not have been solved without the use of social media. And social media had a huge role to play in all of these cases, and I just find it so damn interesting. But anyway, that is it for today's video. If you guys liked it, please give it a big thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of these cases. And if you have any other cases that you want me to talk about that were solved by social media, let me know. But that is it. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, and subscribe for new videos every week. And I will see you guys later. Bye.